We got it figured out. So my name is Maya Hammond. I'm the Outreach Programs Administrator at SWACO. So I do all of our outreach programs. You might have seen me maybe at a tabling event, or I do presentations. So if you're a part of an organization and you would want somebody from SWACO to come talk about recycling, I'd be happy to do that, or compost as well. So I am going to go over just a little bit of what SWACO is, a little bit about recycling just while I have you, but then we'll move into mostly compost, which is the focus for this event. So SWACO is an acronym. We stand for the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. And Ohio is split up into solid waste districts. So there was a bill that was passed that said that Ohio had to be split up into solid waste districts, and it is the job of each of those solid waste districts to keep as many resources out of the landfill as possible. So that is what we do for Franklin County. Solid Waste District of Franklin County isn't as pretty of an acronym as Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. So that's why we're called SWACO, but that's essentially what we are. We serve Franklin County, which is 1.3 million residents, 41 communities. We're a public entity, we're a government agency, and we specialize in diversion and also safe disposal. And then we own and operate the landfill for Franklin County. So we have what's called flow control. So all waste has to come to our landfill from Franklin County. And then all of the recycling for residential and most of commercial goes to Rumpke, which operates the recycling facility here in Franklin County. That is a private, Rumpke's a private company, but they kind of have like a natural-ish monopoly of the area. They're the ones that all of the recycling goes to. So a lot of people think that we're the recycling people. We have recycling drop-off dumpsters, but we take all of that to Rumpke for processing. And again, our jurisdiction is Franklin County only. So I'm going to talk about some of our programs. If you know anybody who lives outside of Franklin County, just if you're talking about our programs, just to be clear, we can only operate and do things in Franklin County. So this is a picture of what we get at the landfill. So this is from 2018. We are currently getting new data right now. We do waste audits, waste characterization studies, where we take samples throughout the year from different loads in different areas to see, and we open them up and we sort it into a bunch of different categories and we make a big report and to see what is coming into our landfill. So if any of you would like to read that report, it's on our website with more details, but this chart kind of summarizes the general idea of the results. So it says 76% of what comes to the landfill is recyclable or compostable, meaning with current technology. Now, there isn't always access to recycling or access to composting, but this just shows us what doesn't have to be in the landfill with what current technology and possibility exists in the world. So this 24% here at the bottom that says non-recoverable material, that's stuff that nobody has a solution for right now. That stuff has to come to the landfill, like some like medical waste or diapers or some like stuff like that. But 76% of it is hopeful. It's stuff that with a better education and programming and access, we can keep them out of the landfill. So this green portion is 27% is compostable. The biggest portion is food waste. And so a lot of this is commercial, but it's also some residential. This blue portion in the middle is stuff that could have gone in the regular recycling bin. So bottles, cans, paper, cups, stuff like that. And then this orange 24% is what we call other recoverable materials. So this is stuff that you couldn't put in your recycling bin. It couldn't go through the mixed recycling sortation process. However, if you took it to a special drop off, it could be recycled in that way. So for example, a battery or an extension cord or like some lights, you can't just throw those in the recycling bin. However, we could recycle those materials. They just have to be handled in a special way at a drop off, maybe because there's a fire hazard or maybe it has multiple parts to it and it has to be taken care of carefully. So that's just a summary. If you're wondering what we're getting in the landfill, this is what it looks like. The EPA did a similar study for all of Ohio, and actually our data was quite similar. So human behavior and where we are tends to be similar in Franklin County as of all of Ohio. But we use this data to drive a lot of our programming. And here at SWACO, we are trying very, very hard every day to get more recycling and composting access. So we're really hoping to see these numbers change a little bit. So just a reminder, with anything for sustainability, progress does not equal perfection. Just because you can't do everything doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. Me in my personal life, I try my best, but there's some areas in which like I could do better, but I don't let that be a reason that I don't try my hardest every day. Because I don't want people to get overwhelmed with recycling or composting and think, oh, it's too hard. Even if you just do a little bit, it's better than nothing. This picture I have here, these pictures are from the Rumpke recycling facility. So this is where all of your recycling goes from your house. So it starts here on the left on the tipping floor. It all gets dumped out loose. And then these machines put it on these conveyor belts. It first goes through a line of people that are looking for large contaminants, but then the rest of it is all machines, magnets, robots, cameras that sort it all into the different categories. And then here on the right is the result, which are these big bales of material. So they're standing in front of a bale of cardboard, and behind them they have bales of different kinds of plastic. And then those bales are sold to a buyer, an end user that uses that material. So this is just a snapshot. Rumpke also does tours, and I'm happy to talk more and answer questions about what happens to recycling, where it goes. But right now we're focusing on composting, so I'm going to keep it brief. This is what goes in the recycling bin. We want to avoid wish cycling, which is just putting something in the bin with the hopes that it'll be recycled. Rumpke only has buyers for certain materials. Their machines can only sort and identify certain materials, and these are them. And so if it's not something that's on this list or on our website, then it can't go in the recycling bin. So even though a Barbie doll is made out of plastic, you can't throw it in the recycling bin because they don't have a buyer that wants a Barbie doll and wants to recycle it. They only want these kinds of plastics. So the first category is paper and cardboard. So like a paper box, or like an ice cream container, even though it's waxy, that's okay. The rule for paper is if you can rip it, it's still enough paper fiber for it to be worth it to be recovered. If it was, say, like a laminated piece of paper, that's way too much plastic. You can't rip it. That's not something that they want. We added cups, so coffee cups or soda cups. Even though they have that wax or plastic liner, it's okay. It's still rippable. It's still enough paper. The paper mills take that, they shred it up, and then water and the plastic have different densities, and they're able to screen out the plastic off the top. Same with the tape on a cardboard box or staples in a big box. You can leave those on. You can leave the labels on things. It all gets screened out in the process. You can recycle egg cartons. And then I also have a slide. We added last year pizza boxes, even if they're greasy. So the rule before was no, like there can't be any grease. It has to be clean cardboard. Cut the lid off. That rule changed. The paper mills realized that they are able to handle the grease. They're able to still recover the paper in a way that's worth it. So any amount of grease or stuck on cheese is okay. We just ask that you remove any big pieces of pizza and just leave it in its most pure form that you can. And then next, shredded paper. A lot of people don't know this. I didn't know this till I started working here. But shredded paper has to be in a clear bag. You'll want to recycle it just like this in your recycling bin. Because if you look back on the recycling facility, everything is loose on this conveyor belt. And so if you recycle shredded paper, it just kind of goes everywhere. And each of those individual pieces is too small on its own to get sorted into the paper category. But if you put it in this clear bag, those human workers on that line will see that clear bag and they'll pull it off and they'll put it to the side and put it just directly towards in the paper pile. It doesn't have to go through the sortation process. So don't fret if you didn't know this. Don't feel bad about it. And a lot of people didn't know. It's okay. You just know now going forward. Next category is plastic. Plastic, this is the hardest one, this is the biggest headache. This is what turns people off from recycling sometimes. So in Franklin County, we go by shape. So a lot of you have seen the numbers on stuff. The number is just the resin code. It's just telling us, hey, if you were to recycle this plastic, by the way, it's polystyrene, or by the way, it's HDPE. That's what those numbers mean. However, that does not mean if your local recycling facility has the ability to take that material. So Rumpke has said the easiest way to go by it is just with shape. So these are the accepted shapes. So bottles, you can leave the lids on. Cups, you can also leave the lids on. So like if you got an iced coffee in a plastic cup, that's totally fine, or an aluminum cup. The only cups they don't want, and I'm so sorry it's confusing, it's just they don't want solo party cups. That's made out of like a different kind of plastic that they don't have a buyer for. Don't feel too bad if you've put them in the bin before. It's hard for people to know, but just if you're here listening, I'm going to tell you that that's the technical rule, and say if you're buying cups for an event. Don't buy solo cups because they'll actually end up in the landfill right now. Just so you know. Um, but so they take cups now, and those you can leave the lids on. And then the next category is tubs of any size. So I have some example pictures here, a yogurt tub, like if you got soup in a takeout or if you got animal crackers, those tubs are fine. You can leave the lids on. If you got spinach in that rectangle container or something, that's considered a tub. The next category is jugs. So anything with a handle, detergent, milk, you can leave the caps on. And the last category is clamshells. We just added those last year. So if they have a hinge, here's some example pictures of clamshells. And then also on the topic of takeout containers, these two examples, the soup container and this paper container, would be accepted. You just want to remove all of the food. So I'm going over this a little quicker than I normally would because we're going to talk about composting. But if you have any questions about, oh, what about this? What about this? Just send me an email, and then I'm happy to answer that for you. Or at the end of this, I'll take questions. And then glass bottles and jars, those are good. Pickle jar. Please take the lids off. They're usually a different kind of material. So if it's a glass jar with a metal lid, you want to separate them. That way the lid can go and be sorted with the metal and the glass can go be with the glass. Everything's coming down the line so fast, people don't have time nobody is unscrewing lids for people. Once it gets to the facility, it's all machinery and it's moving quickly. So we need to make things individualized so they can go where they need to go. The next category, metal cups and cans. And one thing people don't always know about is aerosol cans. You can recycle those. Just make sure they're empty. So anything that isn't like hazardous, so anything you would put on your body is fine, but like pest spray, you would want to dispose of that as hazardous waste or throw it away. You don't want to put it in the recycling facility, but like Lysol spray, that's totally fine. Next category is cartons, so milk cartons, broth cartons, even though they're real waxy, that's okay. And then the biggest, most important thing is to please keep your recycling loose. So if you can, because when it gets there, it can all be sorted. If recycling comes in a clear bag, that's kind of okay. They always empty out the bags, but the humans have to rip open the bags and empty them, and that creates a lot of extra waste, and sometimes things move too fast, and if it looks like the bag is full of trash, maybe it gets thrown away. But it's just, if you want to make sure you're recycling, if you want to do your part, please keep the items loose. You'll see at events or school or businesses, they use clear bags. That's okay, but it's really not ideal. Sometimes custodial staff will use clear bags, but then they'll empty it loose in the dumpster. So just so you know, at your house, please keep it loose. If you use a bag in your kitchen, please dump it out of the bag. Next, what we don't take are plastic bags wrap or film. They wrap around other things. They wrap around the machinery. These are things that have to be collected in a controlled way, like the batteries or the electronics. They have to be taken to a drop-off, like your local grocery store. Or if you do the Hefty Renew program, those can go in there. Batteries and anything flammable, those are recyclable, but we don't want them in the recycling bin. We don't want them going down the conveyor belt. You'll need to take those to a drop-off. And again, next category is like tanglers. So like even though hangers are metal, you don't want to put those in the recycling bin. They tangle. You'd want to take that to be for scrap metal. A cord, even though it has metal in it, you'd want to take it somewhere for e-waste drop off. You can't just put it in your bin. And then we don't take styrofoam in the recycling bin. Okay, so I covered those. So for hard to recycle materials, we have a recycling convenience center on Jackson Pike. It's our facility. We are going to open more that are more spread out, but right now this is the one that we have. It takes batteries, electronics, paint, appliances, string lights, yard signs, oil, light bulbs, food waste, and tires. So somebody emailed me and said, hey, I have an old CPAP machine that's broken. What do I do with it? You could take it to us. That is considered an electronic waste. We will take that just as is. City of Columbus also has some convenience centers. However, they don't take as many items as we do, so please check their website first before you take something there. The biggest thing is they do not take batteries at this facility. We will only take batteries at ours. There are other places to take batteries. If you go on recyclerate.org and you search batteries, it'll show you a map. But just so you know about our convenience center, that's kind of supposed to be your one-stop shop. We will be adding mattresses within the next year. And then whenever our textile recycling comes back, because we did a test run, you might have seen, like we did clothing recycling. It was a temporary program just to kind of get our foot in the door and just to kind of see what it would look like. That way we could better plan for a more permanent program. So that will be coming back within the next year. We also have a hazardous waste facility on 8th Avenue for batteries and anything else hazardous. If you're cleaning out your garage, you can come here for free. A business can come here, but they have to pay a fee. But for residents, mostly everything is free. Recycleright.org is our website for all of this recycling information. So anything I've said that you're not, sure, like, oh, where can I take batteries? If you search batteries in here, it'll show you all the maps. Um, it has a bunch of categories you can browse to learn more details about what can go in the recycling bin. We also have signs that you can print off. So I've used this like when my family comes over for Thanksgiving. I go on this website, I print off a compost sign, and you can customize it to have the materials on it that you know are going to be at the party. So if you wanted to have compost, but you knew that your cups weren't going to be, say you were having a party and you were serving compostable cups and compostable cutlery, you could put on the sign cutlery and cups so that your guests know they can compost it. But if you're not going to have that, you're just going to have regular plastic, then you could take it off of the sign and you can customize it for your needs. So just know that the sign maker tool is here on our website. And also just your one-stop shop for all the addresses and information for all the drop-offs and what goes in the recycling bin. So that's Recycle Right. Our other website we have is SaveMoreThanFood.org. So because food waste is such a big problem, we made like a whole campaign for it. And we have a whole staff member, Sarah Gallagher, who some of you will probably know. She's pretty famous here in Franklin County, but she is our food waste coordinator. And so her job is just to do all of our programming to keep food waste out of the landfill. So this is kind of like our Recycle Right, but for food waste. So we have information about prevention, food donation, and compost. So everything I talk about is going to be on either of these two websites. So we have at SWACO a food waste champion program. So this is for any for-profit organization. We will help them have compost. So if a school or a business or a church, or no, not a church, or a school or a business, or any for-profit organization wants to have compost, but needs help getting started and doesn't really know what to do, we will help with that. And then we will also pay for the containers on the inside, and we will help them figure out the hauler, and we will partially reimburse for like the first few months of hauling. And then we'll help just with the internal education and getting everything together. So that's our food waste champion program. We also have a business recycling champions program, very similar. We will help a business start recycling. If anything that you're involved in, you want them to have better recycling, better composting, please reach out to us. We have programs for that. Other organizations that aren't for profit, like a church or like a food pantry, we have grants that they could apply for. So anybody in Franklin County we have the ability to help them. It just might be we have different categories for it. So if you have any questions about grants as well, I'm happy to answer those. Okay, that was the overview of recycling. I will take questions at the very end. I want to make sure I get to the content quickly so that if any of you are busy, you can tap out. But just going over what is compost. So if any of you aren't familiar, compost is just kind of the word we use to talk about nature's natural process, but in a very human concentrated way. So it's organic materials that have decomposed back into soil. So an organic material, when I was a kid, I used to think organic just meant like when you go to Whole Foods and you go to the organic section, no chemicals, but it also just means anything that's natural. So if you see a sign that says organics here, it just means like food waste or anything compostable, which I didn't always know, but sometimes we refer to organics and food waste interchangeably. So organic materials, anything that is nature made that can be broken down back into soil. So food, plants, paper. So it's just anything that isn't glass, metal, or like large amounts of oil or plastic. And so then the word decomposition, when bacteria and other microbes, they eat that organic material and then they turn it back into soil that we can use to grow more plants. So composting is just nature's natural recycling system. It's the way our ecosystem has been functioning circularly for all of eternity. We as humans have just really disrupted that process, as I'm sure you're aware. And so we have to kind of be more intentional about making sure that things are able to decompose back into soil so we can use it to grow more food. Because right now, as I'm sure all of you are aware, our soil is being mined of its nutrients. We constantly are just taking, and we're never putting nutrients back in the soil. And so that's what composting can do. So what can be composted? This can be pretty confusing. So it's essentially anything that can decompose, but I know sometimes that still doesn't answer the question. So anything that is a plant product. So food, coffee beans, coffee filters, paper towels, tea bags, napkins, flowers, corn husks, those all came from plants. I had somebody ask me once, can I compost a watermelon rind because it's really, really hard? Does it have to be soft? I was like, no, it's a plant. it'll decompose. But just, sometimes it can be confusing, but anything that's a plant can go in there. Any animal products, meat, dairy, bones, fish, eggshells, crab
Gotcha.
shells, those all can go in the compost bin. They're all compostable. I'll talk later about maybe why you might want to keep things out of certain backyard compost. But technically, if you're doing industrial compost, they are decomposable. They do not have to be landfilled. They can be turned back into soil. And then finally, certified compostable products. These are products made from plants meant to mimic plastic, usually. However, at the end of the day, they are made from plants, so they will decompose back into soil. So if you go to an event and you get a cup and it feels pretty plastic, but it says certified compostable, it's not made from regular plastic. It will actually turn back into soil, and you can put that in the compost bin. And so everything we want to keep out, absolutely never put in the compost bin is plastic, glass, metal, or large amounts of oil. And I say that because if you have a greasy napkin, say we're eating pizza and you got grease on the napkin, that's okay. That's not a big deal. It's just like if you were frying, like if you had a bunch of bacon and you had like a cup of oil, you wouldn't want to put that in your compost bin. It's going to clog up those soil pores, and it's going to be really disruptive to the process. So, of course, the benefits of composting, as I said, it keeps nutrients circulating in our ecosystem so we can keep using them over and over again and keep growing nutritious food. We don't want to trap it all inside of a landfill cell. It improves the soil quality, of course. There's more nutrients, it's healthier, it saves space in the landfill. We don't want to put everything in the landfill, then we'll have to keep building more. It saves money on landfill tipping fees. So trash is not free. It's $39 a ton. It's money that either you're personally spending if you're like a business or through taxes or that your government's spending. It's money being spent. It's money being spent through the weight for the fuel used for the trucks to transport that to the landfill. It's all it saves money if you keep food waste out of the landfill. It reduces greenhouse gases generated. So a little bit of chemistry here. But if you have organic material like food waste in a landfill, it's going to rot a little bit. And when it has no access to oxygen because it's sealed, it has no choice but to produce methane, which is CH4, carbon and hydrogen, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So when food waste is in a compost pile, it has access to oxygen and it can produce CO2, carbon and oxygen, which is way less potent, meaning that they trap less heat from the atmosphere and contribute less to global warming. So methane makes the world a lot hotter when it's in the air than carbon dioxide. And so we want to produce carbon dioxide over methane when possible. Now, luckily, here in the Franklin County landfill, we trap all of the gas that's produced and we process it and turn it into natural gas that's usable in the natural gas pipeline. So when you turn on your stove, some of that gas might have come from the landfill. So we fortunately trap it all, and anything that we can't process gets burned off into carbon dioxide. But not all landfills do that. And so a lot of them do burn it off. But just in general, so you know, if food waste is in the landfill, it produces methane instead of carbon dioxide. But that shouldn't be the only reason you want to compost, but just a little bit of chemistry about it, if you were curious. And then also having compost reduces a runoff and soil depletion because it makes the soil healthier and stronger. It's able to retain nutrients better, retain moisture better. It generally just makes everything better. It's great. So different kinds of compost. So compost, it's all similar in the terms of it's stuff breaking back down into soil, but there can be different uses of it, and there can be different nutrient concentrations. So there's kind of a standard higher nutrient compost I have here. The first one is backyard or commercial. So this is usually what you're going to be making in your house, or if you use a compost drop off and it goes to a compost facility, this is what they're going to be producing. This has more of a balanced carbon and nitrogen ratios. There's a lot of food in it, and it's great to use to fertilize a garden. So that's the most basic compost that we usually think about. But there's two other kinds I wanted to touch on. So the next one is mulching compost. So some places are compost facilities like Comtel, but they don't want to handle food waste. You need certain licensing for that. There's a lot of usually contamination. It's a lot more of a dirty business. So sometimes people just make mulching compost, which is just yard waste, straws and sticks and grass and plants. And they use that to return nutrients to their soil, and they kind of use it in the place of mulch. And it usually, if it has food waste, it's only a little bit. But this compost is very bulky. There's lots of air pockets, and it's not very nutrient dense, and it's very heavy on the carbon content. And then the last category is vermicompost, which is the opposite of mulching. It is very, 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 very nutrient dense. It's made in a controlled environment, like in a worm bin. So vermicompost just means worm composting. And so most decomposition happens through microbes and other, it's not just worms. But vermicomposting is when it's kind of a controlled worm farm. And what it produces is these really, really valuable castings that are pretty expensive if you're trying to buy them. But it's used sparingly. You can really overwhelm the soil if you just packed on a bunch of vermicompost. And you use it in smaller quantities. So those are kind of the three kinds of compost. Okay, so all that's great. We love composting. I want to do it. How can I compost? Well, there's tons of options you can kind of find what fits best for you. So the easiest one, I think, well, maybe the second easiest is a drop-off location. So SWACO and City of Columbus, we both provide food waste drop-offs. There are these green bins. I have a picture here. They're these outdoor 24/7 stations where you just drive up and you drop off anything that's decomposable. So everything I talked about, meat, dairy, bones, food waste, coffee filters, compostable products, napkins, tea bags, all of those can go in there and they're going to be industrially composted. And so you can use your container of choice in your house to collect the material, whatever works for you. I used to live alone and I would just use a drawer in my fridge so that I could let it store up for a while. Some people have a 5-gallon bucket with a lid in their garage, or they put it out by their other bins or out on their porch. Whatever works for you. Some people freeze it if they have room in their freezer. And you can take it to the drop off whenever you're ready. And so to find the location map on recycleright.org, if you search food and you hit find recycling locations near me, it'll show you this map. Or on the SaveMoreThanFood.org website, on our homepage, there's a button, Organics Drop-Off Locations. If you hit that, it'll show you it'll show you this map as well. And we're constantly adding them. So right now we're at 35. Last year we were at 30. So hopefully more will continue to pop up. The next, I guess this really is the easiest, but it's not free, is curbside compost. So this works exactly like your trash and recycling. Once a week, a truck comes by and picks it up, and they take it to the same facility for composting that the drop-offs do. So it takes all of the same things. It goes to be industrially composted. So any of the food waste and also the compostable cutlery or cups, stuff like that can go in there. So the current vendors are the Compost Exchange and Compost Clubhouse. Compost Clubhouse is a limited, very limited residential area. I think it's mostly around Bexley. The Compost Exchange is going to be the one you've probably seen at your neighbor's house if you've seen it, these yellow buckets. We had them for a while. It was great once a week. They also do farmers market drop off, but again, none of it's free. It's a subscription, but I would recommend just the curbside pickup. That's what worked best for our family for a while. And then just because we're here and I just want you to know like what exists. So if you see it, you know what's going on. Go Zero is also a hauler. However, they only do commercial. So they'll only do businesses and they're these bright green containers. I know like on Indianola by Studio 35 by where Harvest used to be, there's some Go Zero drop-off locations. I'm not really sure exactly who's allowed to use those. I've been meaning to look into it. But I think that is mostly for the restaurant to use. However, I'm not sure the details on that location. But if you've seen any of these containers around, that's what it's all about. But they all basically go to be composted in the same place. The next category is backyard composting. So this is what usually people think of and they try, but then maybe it doesn't work for them. So I always talk about the other options. But if you want a backyard compost, I think it's really fun. These are the choices. So you can get an enclosed bin if you have pets or kids. These things, they work. You just put the food waste in it, but you also put in like leaves and stuff and you mix it and then the compost comes out the bottom. I'll talk about that in a second. Or you could use a tumbler, which is very similar. However, it's off the ground. And to mix it, you just turn it physically. And then, or you could DIY your own kind of fenced in, squared off area in your yard. It doesn't have to be too fancy. Again, nature's going to do what it's going to do. You just have to make sure you're adding the right things so that it doesn't smell and that it has everything that it needs to thrive. So here's just, you can look up examples of different DIY options. I know for my family, we took the corner of our backyard and we took some stakes in the ground and some chicken wire and we just squared off an area and then made ourselves a little gate and kept a shovel by it. And then we would just, in the fall, we raked all of the leaves into that corner. And then throughout the year, we would just, every time we had food scraps, we would just bury it inside the leaves. And that was that. Super simple. So make it what you need it to be. So the key to composting successfully is this golden ratio. So this is what everyone, if they've ever done it and it didn't work out, guarantee this was the problem. They weren't following this ratio. So it's greens and browns. So 70% browns to 30% greens. Now, what does that mean? So browns are your carbon sources. These are mostly things like leaves, straws, sticks, or paper like an egg carton, shredded cardboard, wood chips. These are all going to be carbon dense. And this is going to be the key to keeping your compost bin dry and from smelling. This is really what's going to drive you to success because the microbes need carbon to survive. If they're only eating food, they're going to be starved and there's not going to be enough like going back to what I was talking about in the landfill with the different gases being produced. If there's no carbon available, the microbes are going to be forced to produce other gases that tend to naturally have a smell instead of carbon dioxide because they don't have carbon access. And so it's really, really important to have a majority of these materials. And then the next category is greens, which is your food scraps, your coffee grounds, the things that you're making your compost bin mostly for. And the problem is people usually make it for food, and so they just put so much food in it all the time, but they never add leaves and sticks or paper, and it ends up smelling. So this 70-30 is a really rough ratio. Just feel it out. But the idea is you want to have almost twice as much browns as you do greens, and you'll be safe. So here's some more pictures of examples of browns. So leaves or wood chips or shredded paper. If you don't want to put it in the recycling bin, this is also a great way to recycle it back into soil in your compost bin. Or if you have access to straw, that works as well. I know for me here in Clintonville, I don't really have straw, but some of you might. And then the greens are going to be kind of things that are more wet. So like the food scraps, but also lawn grass clippings are going to be high in nitrogen. Those will be considered a green. And then like coffee grounds themselves would also be considered a green, but not the paper filter. That's a brown. So moisture. So if it's too dry, it's going to slow decomposition. But if it's too much moisture, it's going to start to smell because the water will fill all of the pores in the soil and they won't be able to get the flow of oxygen to the microbes. And again, it's going to be forced to produce those molecules that have a natural smell to them, that have kind of more of a sulfur smell because they don't have access to oxygen. So it's so important to keep the moisture level about the level of a wrung out sponge. It should just feel healthy and rich, but it shouldn't be like sopping wet or sticky. And it shouldn't be too dusty either. So you can water it with a hose if you really need to, but that's usually not the problem. People's problem is usually that it's too wet. So aeration, this is also key, getting oxygen in it, especially if you're doing an enclosed bin or an enclosed tumbler, you need to be mixing it to get the oxygen in that pile. Otherwise, the middle is going to get so densely packed, it's not getting that oxygen, and that's when it's going to start to smell, and it's going to slow decomposition. Because again, these are live microorganisms. They need all of their nutrients to survive. They need oxygen, they need moisture, they need nitrogen, they need carbon, and everything. So here's some examples. So with your browns, you can kind of help yourself create more air pockets by diversifying the browns that you put in. However, I have found that if you just use leaves, that's usually what people have access to, or shredded paper, it's totally fine. We recommend you just turn it about once a week just to kind of fluff it up and get that air in there. And then also you always want to keep your food scraps covered. So every time you mix it, if there's a banana peel sticking out the top, just kind of shove it back down in there because that's when you're going to start to get flies and pests if the food's not covered. So it needs to be covered. I can't believe I didn't put a slide on that. Oh, I did. Cover your food scraps. That's the most important part. If you take away two things from this whole webinar, if you want a backyard compost, it's more leaves and browns, and keep the food scraps covered, and you should be pretty good. So proper airflow equals no smell, moisture of a wrung out sponge. And then we call it kind of like a lasagna. So when you're adding food scraps, if you were doing one of these stand-up bins, you want to put some browns on the bottom, and you can just kind of start to layer things. Of course, this image isn't a perfect example because you're going to keep adding food scraps every day. But just to give you the idea to keep incorporating different things in it, what we don't want is just a bunch of food in one spot, all in a tight, kind of brick. Nothing is really good is going to happen from that. It needs to be diversified. So, things to avoid in your backyard compost bin. So, meat, dairy, and bones and fish, these are all products of nature. They are compostable, they are decomposable. You might not want to put them in your backyard compost bin. It might attract a coyote, a fox, some other carnivorous creatures to your yard. It's not going to decompose very quickly. It might start to smell if you have a bunch of meat in there. So you can put them in your bin. It's not illegal. It is going to decompose. It's a product of nature. If it was a chicken carcass, if that chicken died in the forest, it would decompose back into soil. However, we just warn people it might not be something you want to put in your backyard compost bin. So that just has to be a risk you're willing to take. Otherwise, what I use, because I do worm composting that doesn't take meat, dairy, or bones, is I just take it to one of our drop-off locations. So you can kind of do both if you want. The other thing you don't want to put in your backyard compost bin is chemically contaminated yard waste. Because if you're going to use your compost, you're really poisoning it with human-made chemicals. We don't want to add that and redistribute it over your yard. You could put diseased, invasive, or poisonous plants, but you would want to cure that compost for a really long time to make sure that all of those diseases were killed off. Because then if you spread that throughout your yard, you could cause a lot of problems. Compost will eventually kill those pathogens and bacteria. It just really has to sit for a while, and the temperature has to get up to um, a certain level. But you wouldn't want to spread it prematurely. So if you're taking a risk by putting some of these things in it, let it sit longer than you would normally. Weeds with seeds, you can do that. Just think about if you're going to spread your compost in your garden, you might not compost it long enough to get the seeds to die, and you might end up spreading seeds everywhere. And then paper towels or napkins with chemicals. So if you used a paper towel and bleach spray to clean something up in your kitchen, you would want to throw that away and don't compost it. What I would recommend is using more of a non-toxic cleaner or a washable rag instead, as a low waste option for that. So again, these could be composted, but would likely give you unwanted results. So we have a troubleshooting guide on YouTube for composting. So I have this QR code here, but if you just search SWACO on YouTube and you backyard composting, the video should pop right up. Again, if it smells bad, it's usually because it's too wet or you didn't have the right ratio or the food was uncovered. If nothing is happening, be patient. Compost takes months. If it's too dry, add water. Or you might need to add soil to introduce more microbes. So if you have one of those enclosed bins and you just put some food in there and maybe a little bit of leaves, there might not be enough bacteria in there to get stuff happening. So I would add some more soil, and then it'll start to happen. Or if you have too many bugs, again, bugs are decomposers, so they're not all bad bugs. We do want some bugs in the compost, but if you're getting a lot of fruit flies or something, it's usually that the food's not covered, or there's not enough carbon in the bin and it's getting too wet and too sticky. So if you try to compost and you're having trouble, please reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. So when the compost is done, it should be light, fluffy, and smell really good. When I smell my finished compost, it makes me feel happy. It smells like nice, rich, healthy, earthy soil, and that's when you know it's done. And again, no rush. The longer you let the compost cure, the better. So if you compost and you are so excited about it, you can't wait to use it in your garden, and you start spreading it over your garden, it could actually harm your plants if it's still decomposing, because those decomposers are going to take nutrients from the soil and from your plants to finish its decomposition process. And so it's going to be fighting with your plants for those nutrients. So you really want to make sure it's finished before you start spreading it. So if you have one of those enclosed bins, like or a tumbler, you'll kind of harvest it from the bottom. Or if you're using one of those rotating tumblers, they usually have a divider in the middle. and you'll kind of work in one side at a time. So you'll fill up one side until it's full, and then you'll leave it, and then you'll just work on the other side while the other side is processing. So if you have more questions about those, I don't have a lot of time to go into detail, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it one-on-one. And then you can use the compost however you'd like. You could give it away. You could spread it throughout your garden. You could spread it throughout your grass. If you don't really like, you don't garden, but you don't want to take stuff to the landfill, you don't have to use your compost intentionally. At the end of the day, it's just soil, nutrient-rich soil. You can just kind of spread it. Um, and it's okay to see some dense chunks in your compost, like pits from a fruit, or avocado rinds. Those are going to take a really long time to decompose, so it's okay if you want to spread your compost before those are completely gone. Okay, I need to plug our community backyards program. So we partner with Franklin Soil and Water to provide this program to residents. So if you want a backyard compost and you want to have one of those enclosed bins, those are not cheap. And so we will pay for, we have like a rebate program to discount the price of that. So you go through a class, and at the end of the class, you have a choice. You can choose a stand-up compost bin like I talked about, or you can also get a rain barrel, or you could get, I think, native plants. Don't quote me on those two, but I know that this is how you can get the free compost bin. So if you have interest in this program, it opens up on Earth Day, and we can help you get a compost bin for your backyard. However, I would say I do like personally, I like just kind of the fenced off pile. That's what seemed to work best for my family because it's easier for airflow and access and storage. But if you have pets and you want to have something like this, we will support you having one. Okay, not the last, but the next category is vermicomposting. So when I lived in an apartment in Washington, D.C., I didn't have composting access, and so I had a worm bin in my apartment to process all of my compost, my food waste. And it worked really, really well. I really loved it. I still have it. I bring it out to events so kids can see it. I think it's super fun. I love telling people I have a worm farm in my room. People are like, "What in the world is that?" But I think it's so cool. It's essentially just indoor composting. You use a certain kind of worms. So not all worms eat food scraps at like the same rate, or some worms don't even eat food scraps. They mostly just eat leaves. Some worms just like are kind of, they're called macro shredders. They just kind of shred things, and then the bacteria takes care of the decomposition process. But there's a certain kind of worm, European red wigglers, that eat food very, very, very quickly. And so they are the kind of worms that we use in vermicompost bins. So you can buy these through Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, or Carolina Science is also a place you can get worms. And they ship them to your door in a box. And then you can put them in your worm bin. So you can make your own worm bin like somebody has here with this container. And you basically just have to put vents in the top and in the side for some airflow. And you just start with like a layer of soil, and then you start putting food in, and you add the worms, and then they do the work. And then it's the same as the backyard compost. You need to keep that ratio high. So in my worm bin, I was just tending to it today. I was turning it to get air into it, and then I was adding shredded paper, and I took our egg cartons and I shred them up and I added that in there to make sure there's enough carbon. Again, it's going to smell and it's going to be too wet if you don't have carbon in there. The worms don't escape. They live in the bin. They're happy there. They will try to escape if you mess up the ratio and it's too moist. They will try and leave if they think their environment is not habitable. So sometimes I'll open the lid and I'll see some worms on the top, and I think, okay, I don't have enough carbon sources in here. It's too moist. They're not happy. But overall, I think the worm bin is really easy. My parents were very hesitant about me having a worm farm when I moved back from DC. But my mom was sharing the other day that she is surprised how much the worm bin doesn't have a smell. We keep it in our laundry room. It's really not a bother. They don't make any noise, so they're great pets. And I think it's really fun to show people how we compost our food scraps. The only thing about the worms is they don't like citrus. So I love oranges, so I have to take all of my orange peels to a food waste drop off. When I put them in the worm bin, I experimented with it. They just got really moldy and they took forever to decompose. I could have left it there, but it just wasn't really, the worms weren't really happy with it. And so I just took it to the drop off. Because it didn't do too well. It didn't decompose very quickly in my worm bin because my worm bin is mostly worms. It's less of the other microbes. is basically my understanding of it. But I think worm bins are really fun. If you want to buy a worm bin and you're curious about it, you can talk to me about it. I think they're super fun. But again, if you live in an apartment, I think it's a great way to have composting. If you want to kind of have that experience and hands-on joy, I think, from backyard composting, but you don't have a backyard, I think a worm bin is a great idea. Next, also, we have countertop machine composting. So the machine just takes the food and the composted material and it dries it out and it grinds it up into like this sawdust powder. And basically what this does is it kind of buys you more time to deal with the food waste. So we have this in our break room here at SWACO. These are pictures from the SWACO break room. You put the food scraps in this machine, and then at the end of the night, it's on a timer. It just grinds it up, it turns it and it dries it and it produces this powder. And then we put it in this 5-gallon bucket. And this bucket will sit in our break room for about a month until it fills up and it never smells. It's like sawdust. And then when it's full, I take it to our drop off that we have here at the facility. So if you're busier and you don't want to constantly be going to a drop off, you don't want to be constantly removing your compost into a backyard, but you don't want it to smell, you could get one of these machines and it'll just buy you some more time and you could store it in a big container in your garage and or something. And then when it's full, you could take it to a drop off. Or this powder too, if you wanted to sprinkle it throughout your yard, you could do that as well. So I think that again, this isn't free, but it can be kind of helpful to adjust for your schedule if you want to compost, but something else doesn't work for you. And again, it doesn't really smell this powdered sawdust. Okay, so collecting food scraps at home, that's all great, but how do I get it from my kitchen to the end result? So it's really about with finding what works for you, but here's some couple ideas. You can get these little countertop bins to store your food in the meantime. You can use compostable liners, compostable bags. They sell them in the trash bag aisle. They're not too expensive compared to regular trash bags. And those can go in if you have a drop off, you can take them to the drop off. You can put them in your backyard. I've put mine in my worm bin. They seem to do just fine with it. And so you can use that. However, if you're going to use a drop off, these compostable bags tend to leak. They're real leaky if you've ever used them. They're not, very moisture resistant. And so sometimes what I've done is I take the bin with me to the drop off or I put it in a plastic bag or in a plastic bucket. And then when you get to that drop off, just empty it out of that container. So you can use whatever container works for you as long as the food scraps get where they need to go and no plastic gets in there. So don't feel guilty. You can collect it in a plastic bag, in a trash can if you really wanted to, and just make sure you empty it out at the drop off or empty it into your curbside bin without any plastic. Some people keep it in their fridge or their freezer. That works for them. A lot of people, personally, in our house, we don't have room for that in our fridge or freezer, but some people do it in their garage. So if you have questions about trying to find a solution for you, I'd be happy to help you brainstorm. So this is my last slide. Thank you for sitting through, but I just have to touch really quickly. A lot of people don't realize how big SWACO is. So we do the landfill, but we also have a ton of programs to try to keep food waste out of the landfill. So we do education and outreach. That's what I'm doing right now. We also will come to schools. We'll do field trips. So kids can come for a landfill tour at our landfill. We talk about what goes in the recycling bin, how recycling works. Then they get on a bus and they go to the top of the landfill. It's completely safe. You never get out of the bus. We have people from all ages, little kids, like senior centers will come down. And you can see how it all works. We reimburse for busing up to $200. So if your school wants to come down, but can't afford it, we will help make it free. All of our services are free. We are here for you guys, for the community. We have a school recycling champions program. That's what this picture is here. So if a school wants to recycle, we will help them get their bins. We will help with the curriculum. So if you work for a school or know a school, we have a schools coordinator, Dana Lotz. This is her daughter here in the photo. And she helps with the schools. She used to be a teacher, so she kind of knows how things work there. We have a bunch of grants. We have community waste reduction grants, event waste reduction grants, special project grants. So anything, any idea that you have, your organization or whatever, that you want to reduce waste in some way, but you need financial assistance, you could apply for one of our grants and it's likely we could help you. So we'll do pretty unique things. We're helping there's a Jewish church that applied for a grant to have a high temperature dishwasher because of kosher rules. They had been using disposable because their dishwasher didn't get to a high enough temperature to make their plates kosher again. If you're familiar with the Jewish, like with the religion and the rules on kosher, their dishwasher was preventing them from serving reusable. They wanted to serve reusable, but they couldn't. And so we paid for them to have a new dishwasher so that they can have reusable. So you can get really creative. There was an event, this Halloween event with the Columbus Speech and Hearing. They used to use disposable bags for their candy collection, but we helped pay for them to have reusable containers for the kids. So you can get creative with those. We have an event container loan program. So if you're hosting any free event for the public and you want to have recycling, but you can't afford, you don't have the storage for recycling bins, we have a whole inventory of those and compost bins that we will lend out to you. They fold flat, they go in your car, and you can use them at any event. Um, we have a website called Choose to Reuse with ideas and events about everything reuse related. And then finally, we have our recycling drop-off dumpsters, which you've probably seen around the county. So these are free for residents. This is to try to kind of give people more access to recycling. So if you live in an apartment complex that doesn't have recycling, or you know somebody whose house doesn't have recycling, you're welcome to use these recycling bins anytime. And again, if your apartment doesn't recycle and you want them to, we have programs to help. Your property manager would just have to be on board with it, but we would be happy to meet with the property manager and talk about options for different things that we can do. So that is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any questions about SWACO recycling or composting? All right.
I want to ask about composting in the winter.
Yeah.
So I have one of the tumblers, and of course, sometimes it just freezes shut,
Yeah.
and I can't put anything in, or because it's so cold, nothing's really happening. So I end up running out of space.
Hmm.
Would you recommend one of those um, machines that dries it out for winter use so
Um,
that you're
it
not
would save
adding?
it would save space. They're not very cheap. I know our machine that we got was like I got it used for $70. So I would just use a drop off. I think
Mhm.
at that point, one of our free drop offs would probably be the cheapest. But yeah, compost is just gonna be slow in the winter, you know, that's how nature goes. When it's cold,
Yeah,
not much is happening.
yeah. I just ran out of room because it's not
Yeah, the
shrinking.
tumblers I think are the slowest because they
Mm,
have like the least access to things. It's more like the piles and stuff that they're gonna have more microbes and things going on versus the isolated tumblers is like the least natural environment
mm.
for it. Anybody else? Well, thanks to everyone too who stuck around. I know it was a lot, close to an hour. But I hope it was entertaining. I hope it was interesting, answered some questions. Um, You can reach out to, if you have questions, you can call our number or like info@swaco.org or go to our website and our contact page. Um, you can put questions in there and we're always happy to answer them.
Okay, someone was asking about accessing the video, and it'll be on the Flow YouTube channel in a couple of days.
Oh, there's a chat. I don't know why I
Mhm.
didn't see the chat.
Okay.
Plastic forks, like lids or plastic bags that you can't just put in your regular recycling bin. Um, and that's for a lot of technical reasons. When it gets to the recycling facility, it messes up in the machinery or they're too small. But Hefty basically said, hey, if residents put all of those hard to recycle little weird plastics in this bright orange bag and then put it in their regular recycling bin, when it comes down to the recycling plant, those human workers in the front, they see that bright orange bag and they put it to the side. They have a pile of them. And then Hefty basically just comes and picks up that pile of that big, truckload of orange bags, and then they take it and then they process it. And so it's just another controlled way of collecting those plastics. So it's not free. You have to buy the bags to support the program at the grocery store. They're not too expensive. I do it at my house and I fill one up like once a month,
Mhm.
with stuff. But yeah, I can't speak to how long it's going to last. It's kind of just like a new thing that Hefty is doing voluntarily because they wanted to, and so we're happy to support it. But it's completely independent of us and Rumpke. So it's their stuff. They take it, they handle it. We don't like, I'm just kind of at the mercy of what they post on their website. They haven't really communicated a lot to us, exactly how their process works. But what we do know is that they turn it into plastic lumber or like decking. That kind of plastic is what they make out of.
Sometimes it's confusing which things go in the plastic you can take to Kroger's and which things can go to the Hefty.
There's a lot of
A
overlap.
lot of overlap.
Everything that goes in the Kroger bag could also go in the Hefty bag.
Mm-hmm.
The Hefty bag is just kind of your like curbside option plus more. Like they'll
Mm-hmm.
take styrofoam, they'll take styrofoam plates and cups, and they'll take cutlery versus the Kroger is just going to take stretch plastic, like a plastic bag or a wrap or
Mm-hmm.
a film. But Hefty kind of takes all kinds of little things or wrappers and stuff like that. So I think it's great. It's really filling a niche. It's filling a need that Rumpke was unable to fill. Again, Rumpke's a private company. They can only take what they have buyers for and what their machines can sort in a bulk and economical way. And so all of those little materials they couldn't do, but they can participate. They were like, sure, you can come pick up the bags. Like we're not gonna, it's not much work for us to put it to the side. So not everyone participates in it in the US, but we do here in Franklin County. So I hope it grows. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been very
Yeah.
informative.
Yes. And sorry, so sorry I was late. Sorry for the delay and all that.
Okay,
But we got it.
we got it.